All right, as far as gaming is concerned in relation to the future, a lot of people are still wondering on what the exact date for the PlayStation 5 is going to be. A lot of people are speculating that it's sometime between 2020, 2021, hopefully 2020. But the thing is, the PlayStation 5 is something that looks like it could be just as successful as the PlayStation 4, but as we know, the landscape of gaming has been changing dramatically over the past couple of years. It seems like more people are into streaming and downloading games opposed to buying, actual consoles and, pretty much buying physical copies of video games. So if Sony decides to, I guess, keep the tradition with making physical copy games for their console, having their, the PlayStation 5 accept physical copy games for their console, some people wonder whether or not that's going to end up affecting the overall sales of the PlayStation 5 once it's released. Because here's the thing. With the Google Stadia and Apple Arcade coming up, the landscape of gaming is drastically changing. And the Google Stadia seemed like it's going to be a lot, cost effective for gamers who want to play video games at a cheap price. But the thing is, along with Google Stadia and Apple Arcade, you also got Nintendo Switch and Xbox One. Sony has formed a partnership with Microsoft in relation to cloud, gaming services and all that. But the thing is, not talking about the partnership, we're talking about the PlayStation 5. Now, it's noted that the PlayStation 5 is supposed to be backwards compatible, and I'm not too sure if it's a similar deal to what we got for the PlayStation 3, where the PlayStation 3 allowed backwards compatibility and could, run some games from, PlayStation 2, but not all games. We're not sure if the PlayStation 5 is going to have a similar deal. And we all know that the PlayStation 4 wasn't backwards compatible, and yet it managed to do pretty well in terms of sales. In fact, I believe it's reached at least 90 million units worldwide in sales since its release back in late 2013. So, as far as whether or not Google Stadia and Apple Arcade will dramatically affect the sales of the PlayStation 5, that's something that remains to be seen. But the thing is, it's hard to speculate in terms of, whether or not the PS5 will be as much of an attraction as the PS4, whether or not Sony plans on turning more towards, streaming, which is something they most likely will start doing in the near future. It's hard to tell because as far as, gaming is concerned, at this point, it seems like, video game consoles in general might end up becoming obsolete before the end of the 2020s decade. In fact, I believe back in 2017, Microsoft talked about focusing more on streaming and all that, and that's what we're seeing with this partnership with Sony. Nintendo, I believe Nintendo also talked about focusing more on mobile gaming in relation to like streaming, because they know that's starting to become a big thing. Mobile gaming and streaming look like it's going to become the future, and I guess people are more willing to play, high quality games at a lesser price than what they would have to if they had to buy an actual game console and actually like buy cartridges or CDs or whatever to play certain video games. With Google Stadia being called the Netflix of gaming, or the next Netflix of gaming, it really makes you think, whether or not the PlayStation 5 will be able to surpass the likes of the PS4. And, it's hard to say whether or not it will sell nearly as much as the PlayStation 2. In fact, I don't think any, home-based video console has sold anywhere close to the PlayStation 2 since it was released back in 2000. But yeah, it seems like ever since, the PS2, Sony has not been able to, get near the number of sales that the PlayStation 2 did. And if I'm not mistaken, it was at least 150 million worldwide, if I'm not mistaken. And And it seems like ever since then, as far as consoles are concerned, sales have been slowly been going downhill in some way. And when I mean downhill, it's just that nothing came close. Like the PlayStation 3 was a success, but not as successful as the PlayStation 2. And I guess you could argue that the PlayStation 4 was more successful than the PlayStation 3. In fact, the PS4 is pretty much the top game console of the teens decade in general. But as far as the PlayStation 5 is concerned, I guess it really depends on what Sony decides to place more emphasis on. I know we're supposed to be getting a PlayStation VR 2, which is definitely something that could add to the overall appeal of owning a PlayStation 5. But the thing is, all that stuff is way too costly. And I guess whether or not, Google Stadia and Apple Arcade, whether or not those two would be a threat to the PlayStation 5 in the future, I guess it depends on the quality of the games and whether or not people are willing to, play video games at a reasonable price opposed to paying way more than they should to play something that's very expensive.